Why is it we can manage 20-person teams and million-dollar budgets at work, but we fall apart when our toddler misses a nap? I spent over 10 years at Google optimizing billion-dollar strategies, but my hardest client was a 2-year-old who refused to wear pants. Welcome to the My Family Strategist podcast. My name is Christina Spark. In today's episode, we are diving into the top 5 strategies that the most high-performing teams at Google use that I now use in my home to save me time. These are the exact frameworks I use that save me over 10 hours every single week. Do you want to find another 10 hours in your week? Then keep listening. I'm breaking down the exact systems I use, from parenting off modes to third space transitions, AI agents for school admin, and why no is the most productive word in your parenting vocabulary. Let's go through our quick disclaimer and start the episode. The frameworks I share are based on my personal experience and professional background, but they are not a one-size-fits-all guarantee. Results may vary depending on your specific family dynamics. Use these strategies at your own discretion. Let's talk about parenting modes, also known as context switching. It was actually a colleague and dear friend of mine who told me about the parenting modes she uses to survive her home life with 2 very young kids and 2 working professional parents. It is the parenting on, parenting off, and parenting light modes. For those of you who had to parent during the COVID pandemic and you were working from home, this would have made this extremely challenging because the lines between your work life, your home life were completely blurred and there were no boundaries. Parenting on is essentially the dedicated time that you spend with your kids, where you do not have any other distractions and your goal is to be 100% present with your child. Parenting off is when the kids are at daycare or with family and you are completely child-free. That is the time you want to be focused on your most high impact and strategic work. Parenting light is when you have some form of assistance, perhaps in the form of a family member over to help you or a nanny. You have some distractions like toys or perhaps screen time if you allow that in your home. This is when you can do low brain power but high volume things like your laundry and dishes and tidying up around the house. The idea behind this is to ensure that you have that mental switch between the different modes, that you are not trying to do really important focused work while you're also trying to be present with your child. Personally, I would never take my son to an important medical appointment 35-minute drive away where I have to have an important discussion with my medical provider. I have a girlfriend who told me about her experience trying to go shopping and try on jeans with her 2-year-old. It's just not going to go well. One of the best pieces of advice I received from a Google leader in my time there was do one thing well instead of 2 things poorly. And how I received this advice was I was talking about an upcoming holiday that I had booked. But of course, I had a lot of important priorities at work. And I talked to him about working when I was on holiday. And what he said to me was, please just do one thing well. And what I would like is that you do vacation really, really well. Because what will happen if I try to work when I'm on holidays is I will do vacation poorly. I will not come back rested and relaxed and recharged. And I will also do work poorly because I'm trying to juggle meetings with bad connection, working in a cramped hotel room while I'm also trying to enjoy my vacation. I have thought about this point deeply and I apply it to everything that I do. The reality is people cannot multitask. A lot of women I know think they can multitask. They can't. Only 2% of the population are known as supertaskers. For the rest of us, for the 98%, we are just context switching all the time. From the email, back to our children, back to our grocery lists, on and on and on. And what's actually happening is we are losing 40% productivity when we switch, and our IQ drops by about 10 points. So we feel like we're getting more things done by multitasking, but we're actually not. We're just doing 2 things, maybe 3 things poorly instead of 1 thing really well. So parenting on is when I have decided that this is a complete phone-free time for myself to be fully present and engage in an activity with my son. Parenting off is when I do all my work, all of the important things that I need to do. That is my time to do that. I do not try to send complicated emails when I'm with my son. I don't want to do two things poorly. I personally find it a waste of my time to do parenting light activities during parenting off, meaning I'm not going to do laundry in the middle of my workday because I have more important things that I need that focused time for. That can wait to when I am low-key hanging out with my son. The other important takeaway with the different modes is that it helps you get into the right frame of mind and create space as you are transitioning from one mode to the next. Some ways people do this is to create some type of ritual. They might have a pair of glasses or a jacket that they wear for work. And when they take off their work glasses, that signals that they are no longer in that mode. And now they're at the home mode and it's parenting on time or parenting light time. Another thing some people do is using their commute as a way to decompress from work and home life, putting some type of a sticker, a post-it note reminder in your car on your dashboard to remind you that now I am beginning the transition to a different mode and set an intention for what that next mode requires of you and how you want to show up. The last thing I will say, and this is specifically for stay-at-home parents, is you need parenting off mode too, probably more than anyone else. Being 24/7 in either parenting on or parenting light is going to burn you out. And it is so important to create space and have parenting off time. You need to recharge. I read this great Harvard Business School article about the corporate athlete, and it talked about how you have a season where you train vigorously and you work so hard, but you also have a season where you rest and you recover. And it's so important to do those things too, so that you can show up your very best when you are competing in athletics. And it is the same for everyone, especially with parenting. You need time to yourself to decompress, to relax, to be parenting off so that you can show up the absolute best during parenting on. Next, let's talk about technology and automation. So the purpose of automation is to remove decision making, remove the mental load of having to make a decision from your daily life. Think about brushing your teeth. You don't have to consciously think about brushing your teeth. You just do it. You're on autopilot. What are other areas in your life you can do that? For myself, I tend to only buy clothes in neutral colors so that I can easily mix and match and get out the door without having to think very hard about what I'm going to wear. And then there's the practical aspects of our household. All of our groceries, our pet food, our household consumables, nappies, wipes, toilet paper, paper towels, cleaning solution. We have a subscription for all of it and it comes recurring. So we don't have to think about, oh, when is this going to be out? When do I need to replenish? It just shows up on our doorstep. Even our backyard, we have an irrigation system. So we don't have to water the plants. I don't have to think about when is the last time this plant needed watering. It's all automated and on sensors. We talk a lot about financial strategies in this podcast, of course. And so things like your bill repayments, your investing, all of that should be fully automating so you don't have to think about it. And the beauty of not thinking about it when it comes to saving and investing is that you are forced to save, and it's not this conscious thing that you have to think about. It's just done for you. And before you know it, you've accumulated all this wealth over time. One thing that is so game-changing for parents is the use of AI assistants. Do you have any WhatsApp group chats about school stuff or daycare that's just a bit out of control? Do you receive newsletters and emails and just all the admin that comes with having a child? Take screenshots, print a PDF, all of those items, and upload it into your AI tool of choice. I use Google Gemini, and just ask it to summarize and highlight any action items and dates. Another thing I do is I use Google Gmail. Gemini is integrated so that you can actually ask it to review your email, find any upcoming events, and put it in your calendar already, or to create action item that you have to tick off. It's really, really good as an assistant to go through the volume, pick out the most crucial information that you actually need to know, and create calendar reminders and events for you. In Google Gemini, you can create a gem, which is like a persona that you create that you feed information to, and that can act as a specific assistant in that task. So let's say it's around school admin. Give it a description and say, you're my executive assistant over school and home life. Here are emails and PDFs, screenshots, school newsletters, and all the things. And your job is to extract any key dates, action items, food requirements, dress codes, payments required, or permission slips, and provide a bulleted list of actions for me. So that could be a way to have a dedicated space to have an assistant. Now, AI agents is the next layer to this. An agent actually removes the human altogether. So in that situation, you would give it permission to review your emails and go through your calendar and automatically start looking for those keywords like excursion or payment required and actually pop things right in your calendar and then tick off done for you. So it does the whole loop without you needing to supervise or oversee. Depending on the complexity, the number of kids, the number of schools, how many activities you do, it might be smart to get an agent to do this. Now, personally, I don't use an AI agent, probably because I only have a 2-year-old and I don't find his social calendar to be that excessive that it requires it. But I do use Google Gemini and Gems all the time. I use the AI features within Gmail and Calendar to streamline a lot of this work for me. I also use it really heavily when it comes to research and writing emails. Any research I do on preschools or daycares or anything like that, it's really AI that I'm using to do all the thinking for me. And when it comes to emails, I just don't have time sometimes to sit down and write a well thought out email. I might give Gemini 2 sentences and they'll come up with a beautiful email. And it really helps, I think, to word things in a more considerate way than what may come across as just a busy, chaotic parent. The next one is delegation. There are things technology cannot do. You cannot automate it. And at that point, can you delegate it to another human? At work, we would use vendors and contractors to do the tedious manual tasks that was not a good use of our time and instead reallocate our time into the more strategic priorities that only we could do. Or we might leverage a specialist team who's more proficient at that particular task instead of doing it ourselves. Corporations are really good at utilizing skill sets to the best of their ability in the most productive way, but we don't often think of home life like this. Recently, I was talking to a close friend who's a lawyer. Her husband's also a working professional, and they were preparing for their very first baby. The topic came up about cleaning in the home because to myself, this is the number one best thing to outsource is cleaning. And I asked my friend, why would you have a lawyer clean your home when you can get a professional cleaner to clean your home? And yes, of course, it costs money, but for the price of one dinner out per month, you could get a professional cleaner in to clean your home. You have to ask, what is the value of your time and what is the best use of your time and your skills, especially in her case, in that postpartum period where you don't know up from down and you have absolutely zero bandwidth. Personally, at my house, we used to like cooking. We used to have the time to do it before we were working parents. Now we just find ourselves in this phase of life where it doesn't make sense. So we outsource cooking and food. We actually use HelloFresh. Food shows up at our doorstep every week. We put it in the fridge and then our housekeeper comes in and she cooks it all for us. She's actually a culinary student. She does bulk cooking for 5 hours and we put it in the freezer and we defrost throughout the week. And that is what we do for food. We do not cook anymore. We do not think about what we're going to eat tonight. We do not go to grocery stores and find ingredients. It saves us at least 8 hours a week just by outsourcing that. And yes, it does cost us. We spend about $165 per week for this service, and then the cost of the food itself is less than $10 per meal per person. So a lot of people are really surprised when I tell them how much it actually costs, because I think it's perceived as something very expensive and only available to super rich people to get this type of housekeeping or meal support. But actually, it's a lot more affordable. Think about the number of times you've had to do Uber Eats last minute because there's nothing in the fridge. That ends up being a lot more expensive than just getting someone and doing meal planning and meal prep. It is a better use of our time, and it is actually more affordable, we find, than doing it the other way. I have friends whose parents come over 2 or 3 nights a week. They're helping with dinner and cleanup. They're helping by watching the kids. Some people have a village that's made up of their family, and some people have a village of people that they pay to be in their village. And also, this is likely not forever. It's really the season of life where you have young children that are not independent. They cannot clean up after themselves quite yet. That is when you're in the trenches and you need this level of support. And eventually they will grow up and you probably won't need as much paid help. Perhaps you can start paying them pocket money for helping out with the chores around the house. It could just be something you look at as a necessity in this particular season of life that you will not have to pay indefinitely. And I talk frequently in this podcast about only spending money on things that you truly value. So although this is my example and I really value these services to save me time, that might not make sense for you. Maybe you love going to the grocery store as a family and it's a ritual you do on Sundays. Or maybe you love cooking and that is your decompress. Fantastic. For me, it's just a chore, which is why I'm really keen to delegate it elsewhere. But are there other things that you are doing today that you don't actually need to be doing? Perhaps you could delegate that specific activity or task you're currently doing elsewhere. And maybe you delegate it to a family member or to a partner. So another great thing that my husband and I did was the Fair Play game cards. If you've never heard of this before, it's essentially a stack of cards and it goes through every single activity in your home. Everything from dishes to taking the bins out to who's going to buy birthday presents, every single thing in life. There's probably 70 or so different items that you talk through. And the idea is you go by one and you have a discussion and you ask who is going to own this activity to completion end to end. And the goal is to completely remove it from the mental load of the other person and also ensure that at the end of the stack of cards, the division of responsibility in your home is mutually agreed upon and it makes sense based on your bandwidth. So I know every single morning when I wake up, that dishwasher is going to be empty and my cats are already going to be fed because that is what my husband does every single morning. That removes the mental bandwidth for myself. So there's no, did you feed the cats yet? Do I need to do it? None of this conversation in the morning when no one has time. That is what my husband does. And I get my son up and ready, dressed and fed. That is how we've chosen our division of responsibility. And it really makes sense. When my son came into the picture, we realized the current delegation of tasks in our home pre-child now looks really different. So we had to shuffle things around in a way that made sense for us. The 80-20 rule. Know when it's good enough and move on. This is certainly something that I had to do all the time at work because in a high performing environment where the volume of work was never ending and you are constantly just trying to get through it and on to the next thing. And parenting is the same. Perfect is the enemy of good. You have to know when you're at a point of good enough and it's time for the next thing. So I used to get pretty stressed out when my son's sleep went off the rails. I pride myself on all the time and investment I put into great sleeping habits. And when we have really bad nights, I used to get really anxious about that. Now my mindset is, does he sleep well or well enough? 80% of the time, great. I'm not going to stress out about it. I'm just going to move on. Does your child eat well? 80% of the time. We do have some nights where Elsie only eats a pouch of yogurt, or he skips dinner altogether. But 80% of the time, he gets excellent nutrition, so I don't stress about that. It's good enough. Do you say no to screen time 80% of the time and 20% you give in? Great, do that. Do whatever works for you. I don't feel guilty when I need to rely on a little bit of screen time, even though my overall goal is to reduce it as much as possible. I know that I can't be a perfect parent and that sometimes good enough has to be good enough. And if 80% seems unachievable, guess what? Research suggests that parents only need to be attuned and getting it right between 30 to 50% to raise a securely attached child. And this is based on the research around the good enough parenting model by Donald Winnicott, who is a British pediatrician and psychoanalyst. So the bar is actually even a lot lower. Last and definitely not least, the importance of saying no. And if you are a working parent, you understand how important it is to put up boundaries at work and say no. And it's even more important in your home life to be able to do the same. As a parent, you are at capacity, you are time poor, and you need to put those boundaries in place and say no to protect yourself and your family. I've had to say no to social gatherings across the city because it's over nap time. And I know that I'm going to pay for it if we have a crappy on-the-go nap. So I'm not willing to do it. I've had to say no to people who are asking for my help, which is really hard because I am an empath and I love helping other people. But I have learned the hard way that it leads to my own burnout and it's not sustainable for me to be stretching myself too thin. So sometimes you have to put a hard boundary in place and say no, but it's all in how you communicate that no. AI is fantastic for coming up with carefully curated ways of saying no gently based on the context. So when I'm saying no to someone who might ask for my help, I like to send a voice memo instead of a text. Text can come across inadvertently cold, and you can add warmth to your voice, but sometimes calling someone or doing it face to face can feel overly confrontational. It doesn't let the other person take a moment and digest before they respond. It's important in your communication to focus on yourself when you are setting that boundary. I'm at max capacity, and I know that if I were to take on this additional activity, I would not be able to give it the time and attention that it deserves because I have so much going on with X, Y, and Z at home. So it focuses the attention back on yourself and your own bandwidth and capacity, and that is why you have to say no. Focusing it away from the other person and focusing on yourself, that really removes it from being taken too personally. I'm also a fan of finding high impact but low effort ways to basically say no, but in a way that sounds like yes. So at Google, we would use this concept of yes and instead of no. So no tends to shut down collaboration and shut down the conversation, whereas yes and keeps things open. And it actually is derived from improv comedy, where you don't want to shut down that next scene because you need to keep it moving. So for example, in a corporate setting, if somebody asks to take on a new project, instead of saying, no, we don't have the bandwidth and we don't have the headcount, you would say, yes, we can do that project. And which of these projects in Q3 should we then deprioritize so that we have the time and resource to allocate for this? Another example of yes and, instead of saying, no, that's not my team's responsibility or my responsibility, you say, yes, and I'm happy to help you identify the right stakeholder and the right team to help you with that, to give it the attention that it deserves. So it's a creative way to say yes in a way that you're actually saying no to something else in order to make capacity for it. So this can also be applied if you don't need to set a hard boundary and you can be flexible in that situation of saying no to lunch across the city because of nap time. I could say, yes, we are so looking forward to spending time with the family. We'll be there at 2 p.m. after LZ has his nap and meet you for some coffee and cake. Also, I'm a big fan of sending gift cards, sending Uber Eats delivery to friends who I feel like need support, but I don't physically have the bandwidth to provide it myself. Those are other low impact ways of saying no if you want to meet in the middle. But I don't want to underestimate that it is actually healthy to set boundaries and to say no and be firm on those boundaries when it occurs in your personal life. So let's recap on the top 5 strategies the most high-performing teams at Google use that I now use in my home life to save me at least 10 hours per week. Number 1 is parenting modes. Parenting on, parenting off, and parenting light, so that you can stay present with your kids, but protect your own time. This is about doing one thing well instead of 2 things poorly and not trying to multitask. Where can you find 1 extra hour per week of parenting off time? Do you need to ask your partner to take over a morning? Do you need to wake up a little bit earlier? What myself and my husband do is I have a Sunday afternoon block that is 3 hours. That is just me time, where I can go to a dance class, come home, have a shower, and then move into my parenting on mode. My husband gets the Saturday morning block where he gets to go to running club and do the same thing. Enjoy the drive there, do a proper warm up, do a nice run, come home, shower, and then switch into parenting on or parenting light for the weekend. And the weekends where we skip this and we don't have dedicated parenting off time feel very, very different Monday morning than the weekends where we do ensure that we protect this time. The next is technology and automation. This is removing the mental load from your brain, either to a machine or to doing something on autopilot. What daily decisions are you making right now that can be moved to autopilot or a machine could take over for you? Things like, what am I going to cook for dinner? What am I going to wear? What bills do I need to pay? What emails do I need to respond to? Using AI as an assistant can significantly reduce the mental load as well as the amount of time that you spend on these mundane daily tasks. Thirdly, delegation. The most empowering thing that you can answer is understanding what is the value of your time. And I would encourage you to put a dollar figure on it. Now, it might be your hourly rate at work, or it might be a lot more. For myself, it's much higher, because there have been times when I've been in deep research mode and I've identified a great investment opportunity or a tax strategy that has saved my family tens of thousands of dollars. So in that instance, an hour of my time was worth way more than my hourly rate. And also, there have been moments I've had with my son that have been so precious and so incredible. I wouldn't trade those hours for millions of dollars. So thinking about a dollar value is such a good exercise to do. And it allows you to then make decisions more confidently of when is this worth delegating or outsourcing. If the dollar value of your time is higher than what you can pay someone to do a task that you absolutely hate, like cleaning, then theoretically, it makes sense to then delegate that task out instead of doing it yourself. Number 4 was the 80-20 rule and when to apply the good enough parenting model. What is one perfectionist habit that you are holding on to, and if you were to let go, there would be zero difference in long-term outcomes for your child or children? For myself, I used to spend time making toddler specific meals for LZ. There's so many awesome blogs out there and just cute recipes for little kids. And I used to spend a lot of time getting the ingredients, making it special, only to have most of it thrown out in the bin because of my picky eater. I am now only cook meals that the whole family can enjoy. I mean, of course, I'll still do it if it's really fun and the whole family can eat it. But otherwise, that is a perfectionist habit of being at the park and pulling out these perfectly made toddler sandwiches. I just don't do that anymore. Lastly, is the power of no. Protect your most valuable asset, which is your bandwidth. Think back to the last time you felt totally burnt out. What did you say yes to that put you in that position? And what did you learn from it? Use tips like the yes and hack to say no in a way that really sounds like yes, and rescope requests that fits into your own schedule and your own bandwidth. One of my biggest takeaways that I've learned in 15 years working at a high performance culture that is obsessed with efficiency is that a system is only as good as it is sustainable. Any system that you put in place in your home has to work for your whole family unit, and it has to be sustainable and work over time. Resource management is about saving your sanity, saving your time and energy, and reinvesting it in a place that matters more to you and that you value. Do not try to be the perfect parent. Reinvest in yourself, in your family, and in your sanity. Thank you so much for joining me. I will see you next week as we tackle more strategies for busy parents. Have a good day.